Welcome to our Angkor Wat video. Johnny and I were looking forward to this trip for several years. Finally, in February in '05, we finally made it. So join us as we tour the temples in Angkor Wat.
Angkor in northwestern Cambodia is the site where Khmer kings established their capitals from the 9th to the 12th century. Today, Angkor is an extensive archaeological site covering more than 1,200 square miles with more than 100 temples. At the end of the 9th century, King Yasovarman re-established his kingdom a few miles northwest of the present-day town of Siem Reap. He centered it on a hill known as Ba King, which would become the center of Angkor proper. It was here that the first Temple Mountain was built, and it is here that we begin our exploration of Angkor, City of Temples. The two most common ways to ascend to the summit and the Temple of Ba King include an elephant ride up the left side of the hill, or by walking this steep stone cliff. Due to the heat of the midday sun, visitors are advised to make the ascent in either the early morning or late afternoon hours. After Yasovarman became king in 889, he founded his own capital and built Ba King as his state temple. The sites known today as Angkor and thus Ba King are sometimes called the first Angkor. A square wall, each side of which is 2.5 miles long, surround the city. This temple is the earliest example of a plan with 5 sandstone sanctuaries built on the top level of a tiered base arranged like the dots on a die, a style of which would be copied in later temples. The number of towers at Ba King suggests a cosmic symbolism. Originally 109 towers, many are now missing. The brick towers on the tiers represent the 12-year cycle of the animal zodiac. The crowds you see gathered at the top level, like patrons in an amphitheater, are waiting to view the sunset over the Temple of Ba King. The year is 1150 AD, and the present Khmer king, Yasovarman II, is finally able to view his completed temple structure after an estimated 30 years of construction. This temple, or Wat, at Angkor, remains one of the most beautiful and historical sites in the world. For hundreds of years, the lost city of Angkor was itself a legend. Cambodian peasants living on the edge of the thick jungle around the Tonle Sap Lake reported findings which puzzled the French colonists who arrived in Indochina in the 1860s. The peasants said they had found temples built by gods or by giants. Angkor Wat, dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu, represents a Hindu conception of the universe, an earthbound model of the cosmic world. The center symbolizes Mount Meru. The 5 surrounding towers form the mountain peaks. The main wall portrays the mountains at the edge of the world, and the moat you're looking at, the infinite oceans beyond. The entire structure covers over 500 acres. Entrance to the main temple first involves 2 long walkways, the first of which is this sandstone causeway which crosses the moat. For $11, visitors may be taken up in the balloon for 10 minutes. The causeway is 273 yards long and leads to the entry gate with its 3 towers. We are now looking back at the entrance gate, having crossed the second walkway, a walkway which is almost 4 football fields long. A low railing resembling the body of a serpent borders each side. The second walkway leads to this terrace in the shape of a cross, known as the Terrace of Honor, just in front of the principal entry tower of Angkor Wat. Supporting columns and horizontal carved molding around the base accentuate the form of the terrace. Steps flanked by lions on pedestals are on 3 sides of the terrace. Ritual dances were performed here, and it may have been where the king viewed processions and received foreign dignitaries. Once inside, most visitors begin their exploration of the temple with the bas reliefs that cover the exterior wall of the first level. These bas relief carvings were used to teach the Khmer people about Hindu mythology and historical accomplishments. The square base of the upper level is 43 feet high and rises over 131 feet above the second level. 12 sets of stairs with 40 steps each, 1 in the center of each side and 2 at the corners, ascend at a 70-degree angle, giving access to this level. Due to the steep angle and narrow width of the steps, visitors are advised to use much caution when ascending and descending the stairs. The third level supports 5 towers, the most prominent architectural feature of Angkor Wat. Graduated tiers, one rising above the other, give the towers a conical shape, and near the top rows of lotuses taper to a point. The overall profile imitates a lotus bud. Depending on the time of day or angle of the sun, the colors of the stones can appear with the rich brown hues you see here to an eerie and almost colorless gray. The layout of the third level is repeated in many Khmer temples, a central sanctuary surrounded by 4 towers joined to each other by small arched galleries. The temple was the center of Angkor's spiritual community and the living quarters for over 20,000 people. Ordinary people were allowed to enter the temple, but no further than the first bas-reliefed wall. The second level was reserved to priests who had retired from the outside world to meditate. The third level was only accessible to kings and high priests. Over 1,500 of these apsaras or celestial dancers line the walls of the second level gallery. Pang, a Cambodian poet in the 17th century, wrote, "These millions of gracious figures filling you with such emotion that the eye is never wearied, the soul is renewed, and the heart satisfied. Here we see a statue of the Hindu god Vishnu. It is generally accepted that Angkor Wat was a funerary temple for King Suryavarman II and oriented it to the west to conform to the symbolism between the setting sun and death. The bas reliefs designed for viewing from left to right in the order of the Hindu funeral ritual support this function. As you make your way around to the backside of Angkor Wat, you have a clear view of the first level gallery that encircles the temple. The central sanctuary rises on a tiered base 137 feet above the upper level. The highest of the 5 towers, it is equal in height to the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. Two of these buildings, the so-called libraries, stand in the courtyard on the left and right, just past the middle of the causeway. Five entry towers lead to the ancient city of Angkor Thom and are among the most photographed of all the ancient Cambodian ruins. Each sandstone tower rises 75 feet to the sky and is crowned with 4 heads, one facing each cardinal direction. The faces may represent the rulers of the 4 cardinal points at the summit of Mount Meru. Each entry tower is flanked by a row of 54 stone figures on each side, demons on the right and gods on the left, to make a total of 108 mythical beings guarding the city of Angkor Thom. Visitors may pass through the entry tower by elephant, tuk-tuk, bus, or car. Just remember to keep your hands inside at all times. Coming through the south gate brings us to the only temple which may rival Angkor Wat as a favorite for visitors, the Bayonne. Built nearly 100 years after Angkor Wat, the Bayonne stands in the exact center of the ancient city of Angkor Thom, the new Khmer capital established by Shah Rahman VII, who became king in 1181. Having driven out the Kham conquerors who had occupied Angkor Wat and many of the other temple complexes, Shah Rahman led an almost unparalleled program of building, and as a Buddhist instead of Hindu, we start to see in the Bayonne a mix of both Buddhist and Hindu icons. It is not hard to see how the Bayonne gets its nickname, the Face Temple, with over 2,000 large faces carved in 54 towers. Since it was located at the center of the royal city, it seems possible that the Bayonne would have originally been a temple mountain conforming to the symbolism of a microcosm of Mount Meru. The middle part of the temple was extended during the second phase of building. The Bayonne of today belongs to the third and last phase of the art style. The basic plan of Bayonne is a simple one comprising 3 levels. The first and second levels are square galleries featuring bas reliefs. A circular central sanctuary dominates the third level. Despite this seemingly simple plan, the arrangement of the Bayonne is complex, with a maze of galleries, passages, and steps connected in a way that make the levels practically indistinguishable and creates dim lighting, narrow walkways, and low ceilings. Centerpiece of Shah Rahman's building program, and the similarity of the faces on the temple's towers to the other statues of the king have led many scholars to the conclusion that the faces are, at least in part, representations of Shah Rahman VII, although this remains a topic of debate. The dense jungle that surrounds the temple camouflaged its position in relation to the other structures at Angkor, so it was not known for some time that Bayonne was in fact the center of Angkor Thom. Originally dated from the 9th century, a discovery in 1925 of a pediment depicting a Buddhist icon pushed the date of the monument ahead some 300 years to the late 12th century. A peculiar feature of the Bayonne is the absence of an enclosing wall. It is, though, protected by the wall surrounding the city of Angkor Thom. The architectural climax is the third level, with the central sanctuary. The east side of this area is crammed with a series of small rooms and entry towers. The multitude of faces at different levels affords endless fascination. An explorer in the 1920s wrote, "Godliness in the majesty and the size, mystery in the expression." bas-reliefs on the outer gallery are a marked departure from anything previously seen at Angkor. They contain general scenes of everyday life, markets, fishing, festivals, jugglers, and history scenes with battles and processions. The reliefs are more deeply carved than at Angkor Wat, but the representation is less stylized. The scenes are presented mostly in 2 or 3 horizontal panels. As at Angkor Wat, the color of the stones appears to magically change as the day progresses and the sunlight washes over these ancient faces. The Bayon remains one of the most mysterious temples of the Angkor group. Its symbolism, original form, and subsequent changes and constructions have not yet been untangled. Our next stop in the ancient city of Angkor Thom brings us to the Royal Square and the Terrace of the Elephants. This square forms a vast court that must have lent itself admirably to the display of processions and military parades. From the reign of Yasovarman VII, the builder of the Elephant Terrace, towards the end of the 12th century, the king and his courtiers were able to view these proceedings from the terrace. More of Angkor's grand bas-relief adorn the walls of the Terrace of the Elephants. In the year 1296, towards the end of the period of glory, the Chinese envoy Shua Takuan wrote an informative description of some of the festivals held at the Terrace of the Elephants. Every month a festival is held. In the 9th month, the entire population of the kingdom is summoned to the capital to pass in review before the palace. With the 5th month comes the ceremony of washing the Buddhas. Then Buddhas are carried from all over the kingdom, water is procured, and the king lends a hand in the cleansing. When the king leaves his palace, the procession is headed by cavalry. Then come the flags, the banners, and the music. 300 to 500 gaily dressed palace girls with flowers in their hair and tapers in their hands are massed together in a separate group. Following them come chariots drawn by goats and horses all adorned with gold. Ministers and princes mounted on elephants are preceded by countless bearers of scarlet parasols. Finally the sovereign appears, standing erect on an elephant and holding the sacred sword. Opposite and parallel to the Terrace of the Elephants stand 12 nearly identical towers, perhaps begun under Yasovarman VII, but they do not display the classic Bayon style characteristic of his other monuments. Some towers are undergoing renovation. The original function of the towers is a matter of debate, but Zhao Daquan in his 12th century classic Customs of Cambodia gives a romantic but dubious first hand of their function. He wrote that the towers were used to settle legal disputes and matters of criminal justice. The belligerent parties were kept in the towers for a few days. The one to emerge in ill health was declared the loser, or guilty by divine decree. Just to the north of the Terrace of the Elephants lies the Terrace of the Leper King, aligned with it but standing separate. A mound of masonry about 27 yards across by 6 yards high, it is formed as a fortification with sides that are lined in sandstone and entirely sculpted with figures in high relief. Who was the Leper King? Mystery and uncertainty surround the origin of the name. The long-held theory that Shaidavarman VII was a leper, and that is why he built so many hospitals throughout the empire, has no historical support. Another theory suggests that the Leper King statue got its name because of the lichen which grows on it. Whatever the reason, both the internal and external bas reliefs are intentionally monotonous in presentation. They show only seated figures apparently representing various characters from Hindu mythology. Shown as giants with sword or club, and women with bare torsos whose costume and triangular headdress with flaming discs relate to the style of the Bayon. The last temple we visit within the city of Angkor Thom is Pimyanakas. From inside the courtyard we are looking back through the sandstone entry tower. The tower is in the shape of a cross with two wings. Vendors selling their wares must remain at a distance from the entrance to the temples. Pimyanakas is located inside the enclosure of the royal palace of Angkor Thom. The single sanctuary is on a base with 3 tiers. It is approached by 4 steep stairways, one on each side. These stairways are framed by walls with 6 projections, 2 per step, decorated with lions. Elephants once stood on sandstone pedestals in the corners of the base, but today they are mostly broken. According to legend, there was a gold tower believed to be Pimyanakas inside the royal palace of Angkor the Great, where a serpent spirit with 9 heads lived. The spirit appeared to the Khmer king disguised as a woman, and the king had to sleep with her every night in the tower before he joined his wives and concubines in another part of the palace. If the king missed even one night, it was believed he would die. In this way, the royal lineage of the Khmer was preserved. This gate leads us to our next stop, the Temple of Taprom. We are about to leave behind the sights and sounds of modern-day life and enter a place that, unlike any in Angkor, reminds us of just what an ancient place this is. Prepare to truly step back in time. Taprom was one of the first temples begun in Shevaman VII's massive building program and is located about 3 miles east of Angkor Thom. Started in the late 12th century, expansions and additions continued as late as the rule of Rindravarman at the end of the 13th century. The temple's official inscription recorded that the site was home to more than 12,500 people, with a further 80,000 in surrounding villages. Following the art style of the Bayon, the temple's modern name means Old Brahma, but the original name was Rajavihara, or Royal Temple. Taprom is the undisputed capital of the Kingdom of the Trees. It has been left untouched by archaeologists except for the clearing of a path for visitors and structural strengthening to stave off further deterioration. Because of its natural state, it is possible to experience at this temple the wonder of the early explorers when they came upon these monuments in the middle of the 19th century. Built as a Buddhist monastery and university, it was centered on veneration of the king's family. The main image was modeled on his mother, while the 2 satellite temples in the third enclosure were dedicated to his guru and his elder brother. Shrouded in dense jungle, the Temple of Taprom is ethereal in aspect and conjures up a romantic aura. Fig, banyan, and kapok trees spread their gigantic roots over stones, probing walls and terraces apart as their branches and leaves intertwine to form a roof over the structures. Trunks of trees twist among stone pillars. A visitor to Taprom 40 years ago wrote, "The strange, haunted charm of the place intertwines itself about you as you go, as inescapably as the roots have wound themselves about the walls and towers." The inscription, which listed the population, also records that Taprom was home to 18 great priests, 2,700 officials, over 2,000 assistants, and 615 dancers. Among the property belonging to the temple was a set of golden dishes weighing more than 1,000 pounds, 35 diamonds, 40,000 pearls, over 4,000 precious stones, 512 silk beds, and 523 parasols. Even considering that these numbers were probably exaggerated to glorify the king, Taprom must have been an important and impressive monument. Everywhere around you see nature in the dual role of destroyer and consoler, strangling on the one hand and healing on the other. No sooner splitting the carved stones asunder than she dresses their wounds with cool, velvety mosses and binds them with her most delicate tendrils. Next, we arrive at Takio, the most puzzling of the minor temples, stepping up toward the sun with dignity and power suggestive of Angkor Wat. It is dripping with green and crowned with trees, but is still supreme over the forest. Its rocky masses rising above the tops of the coconut palms convey the impression that it only recently emerged from some cavern underground, carrying the forest with it in its rocketing ascent. It was built at the end of the 10th century by King Shayavaman V and dedicated to the Hindu god Shiva. Takio is the first temple built entirely in sandstone, and as such serves as a milestone in Khmer history. Enormous blocks of stone were cut to a regular size and placed in position. The absence of decoration at Takio gives it a simplicity of design that separates it from the other monuments. Takio's lack of ornamentation makes it distinctive among the works of the Khmer, who were so fond of decoration, but its very simplicity gives it architectural importance. Its plan shows the development of a new spirit in the people. An unusual aspect of this temple is that it remains unfinished, the reason for which is not completely known. Had it been finished, Takio would undoubtedly have been one of the finest temples at Angkor. With our next temple of Baikong, we return to the site of the first Khmer capital, and one of the 3 temples that comprise the Rolos group. Built in the late 9th century by Indravarman I, the third Angkorian-era king, Baikong was his state temple and is the most impressive member of the Rolos group. Baikong represents the first application of the Temple Mountain architectural formula on a grand scale, and would set the architectural tone for the next 400 years. The temple displays a very early use of stone rather than brick. 7,000 people lived inside this temple, which was decorated with many lions and elephants, of which just a few are left today. The children you saw walking and riding their bikes on the path to Baikong attend school in the white building you see in the distance. This long sandstone building may have been a storehouse or library. There are a total of 8 sanctuary towers at Baikong. The towers, with one door opening to the east and 3 false doors, have a stairway on each side which is decorated with crouching lions at the base. The door entrance and the false doors were uniformly cut from a single block of sandstone. Though begun by Indravarma I, Baikong received additions and was later expanded by other kings. The uppermost section and tower may have been added as late as the 12th century. This gate leads to our next stop, Prakan, another of King Jayavarman VII's temples built in the second half of the 12th century. Whereas the temple of Taprom was dedicated to his mother, Prakan was dedicated to his father and probably served as a temporary residence while his permanent home in Angkor Thom was being reconstructed. An inscription found in 1939 indicates that Prakan was the ancient city of Nagaraj Shahakri. The second part of the name, Shahakri, is the Thai word for sacred sword, the meaning of Prakan. The sacred sword has a long history in Khmer tradition, where in the 9th century, Jayavarman II left his successor a sacred sword, the Prakan, which descendants still guard. This building, to the west of the main temple, is believed to have housed the sacred sword. Here we see our familiar explorer, looking a bit weary and perhaps in need of a cold beer. This building contains one of the only examples of round columns, and may be from a later period. The enchanting 10th century temple of Bante Sri is one of the most popular sites. The special charm of this temple lies in its remarkable state of preservation, small size, and excellence of decoration. Bante Sri loosely translates to Citadel of the Women, but this is a modern nickname that probably refers to the delicate beauty of the carvings. Built at a time when the Khmer Empire was gaining significant power and territory, the temple was constructed by a Brahmin counselor under a powerful king, Rajendravarman, and later under Jayavarman V. Bante Sri displays some of the finest examples of classical Khmer art. The walls are densely covered with some of the most beautiful, deep, and intricate carvings of any Angkorean temple. The temple's relatively small size, pink sandstone construction, and ornate design give it a fairyland ambience. The signs of theft are unfortunately seen, as with the missing head on this statue. Built roughly at the same time as Angkor Wat in the late 11th century, the Temple of Tomanon belongs to a group of temples just outside the east gate of Angkor Thom. Its surrounding walls have completely disappeared, leaving only the gateways on the east and west ends and a ruined tower. Originally, the temple would have had a hall linked to a central tower and enclosing walls with elaborate gateways. A library to the southeast is the only other building in the complex. There are repeated pediments above the doorways, which are even more elaborate than those at Angkor Wat. Another of Jayavarman VII's monuments built in the late 12th century is Nik Pion. This small island temple was located in the middle of the last reservoir to be constructed by a Khmer king in the Angkor area. The small central temple sits in the center of a cross or lotus pattern made up of 8 pools, which do fill up during the rainy season. Four of these chapels are set into the steps of the central pool and served for the ceremonial washing of pilgrims who hope to be cured of illness or afflictions. At the time of its construction, the temple was called Raja Shri, but took its modern name of Nik Pion, which means coiled serpents, from the encoiled nagas that encircle the temple. Completely lost in the jungle is the Temple of Ta Som. It is the most distant temple in the Grand Circuit in Angkor. This classic Shavam in the 7th monument reminds one of the tree-covered Temple of Ta Prohm, but is built on a much smaller scale. In the past, one of the significant features of Ta Som was the growth of ficus trees in the faces at the entry tower, which provide a dramatic example of nature and art intertwined. These had been removed from the East Tower, but are still visible here in the West Tower. Here we see the small Hindu temple of Bakse Shamkrong, which means the bird who shelters under its wings. The name of this temple comes from a legend. In it, the king was trying to flee an Angkor under siege. Suddenly, a huge bird swooped down and sheltered the king under its wings. This is one of the first temples to be constructed of durable materials such as bricks and laterite. Most of the stucco that once adorned this temple is now gone. The decorative stonework resembles wood, especially the moldings around the door. Although there are 4 stairways to the top, one on each side, the only entrance is here at the east. Blind doors are on the other 3 facades. The shrine at the top was built to house statues of Shiva and his spouse Devi. This pyramid temple with a single tower is designed with perspective tricks. The stairs narrow at the top, and as the 4 stages rise upward, their height decreases. Both of these devices make the structure seem taller. Even after decades of restoration and reconstruction on the temples in Angkor, you can clearly see that there is much work yet to be done. And so we come to the end of our tour of some of the temples in Angkor. We hope you have enjoyed this brief glimpse into this wondrous place. The ancient Khmer are long since passed away into the heady mists of history, but their descendants live on, going about their daily lives in much the same way as their forebears hundreds of years ago, plowing the rice fields, spreading their straw mats along the roadside to sell their wares, and greeting the foreign traveler with clasped hands and bright smiles. Which bear a striking resemblance to the faces on the stones. They invite you to explore their lost world and see for yourself its incalculable wonders.